we're going to be taking this series a little bit further about Galatians, about freedom that's in Christ. And Paul is going to be the focus of what we're talking about today, and the life-changing gospel, good news about God's grace. This is God opening his arms wide and being generous towards us and bringing us in. Regardless of who we are, he's bringing us into his family. One of the things I did about a month ago was to go into London with my wife Alison, also with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, one from Devon and one from Cornwall, and their respective partners. And we saw different sites of London. I was playing host, which is a bit of a joke because I'm the world's most geographically challenged person. I mean, I need sat-nav to find the corner shop. It's that bad. So in the case of these, I wonder if anybody knows these particular photos. So for instance, this one, does anybody know this one? Really? These people don't get out much. So this is the Emirates cable car, okay?
Airline.
Oh, okay.
The Emirates Airline, because
I need another 2 minutes. I just need another 2 minutes preach just to cover that. Yeah, that's all right. You know, I'm keeping time here. Emirates Airline cable car. I just couldn't fit it in with the font that we use. Anyway, moving on swiftly. What about this one? Any offers for this one? Okay, Tower Bridge. And there we are. There we go. This one's a bit more challenging. Any offers for this one? Oh, dear. You can always tell a Londoner, can't you? There we go. And no prizes for this next one, which is the Houses of Parliament, a.k.a. my workplace. So this is what I do. I work there. I basically bring together the software tools that people need, this is where you glaze over, to be able to restore the Houses of Parliament to its full glory. So that's what we use, all the different tools we use. And the rest, really, as I've said, if a job is more than 3 syllables, it's boring. So I won't go any further with that. And one of the things that I need to do is to get past these guys, okay? That's part of my job, is to get, no, it isn't. But I do have, actually, it's in the pocket of my jacket, I see, forgetful as I am. But I do actually have, I probably shouldn't actually say this, but it's not good to show in public anyway, which is a parliamentary pass. Essentially, that means that I have the right to go past these guys, just show the pass, but it also means that I can bring 6 people onto the estate with me. That's an important part of it. And as long as I show that pass, those 6 people will have to get a visitor pass. So it's a bit like airport security. So essentially, if you don't have a pass like the one you see there, then you really can't get in at all, okay? What we did see when we got into there was this wonderful House of Lords, and you know, the absolute gorgeousness of it. This doesn't really do justice to what we saw up close and personal. And of course, most people would have to pay to do a tour to see this. I didn't have to go through that rigmarole. What was also very special is that, how do I say this? At 61, there is, I'm drinking water now and I'm thinking about this at the same time, but there's always the certain need for the call of nature, shall we say. And in that situation, because I'm geographically challenged, I then needed somebody to help us to find that particular location. And as a result of that, did ask one of the catering ladies, and the catering lady then took us on the journey, then said, oh no, I need you to show you one of the most gorgeous things that is in the collection of art that we have at the House of Lords. And we just went down different corridors, up staircases. Of course, at the same time, the call of nature is going on, but then saying, nope, we will have to see this wonderful work of art. But it was well worth it, because in the end, what we saw was the Armada portrait of Queen Elizabeth. We also then went on to go into Westminster Hall, where the Queen was lying in state. You remember it was there. And beneath there's another place which is just as stunning. And it's this place here called St. Mary Undercroft. This is, it's gilded all around. It was just a fantastic experience. And all of this has come out of this fantastic opportunity that I have received in terms of working at Parliament. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why am I saying this? And there are happy faces, obviously looking out towards the Thames because you can't take any pictures. But why am I saying this? Why is this important? Because it's always been, to me, my destiny and my heritage to be doing this type of work. One of the more somber aspects of this has been when we were asked, as part of the run-up to the Queen's lying in state, to form the numbers so that they could just get an idea of how to choreograph the event. And so there we are, obviously before the Queen was laid in state, just to make sure that we could fit everybody into that space, dignitaries and parliamentarians. I suppose the truth of it is that I am a public servant of public servants. That's who I am, through and through. If you cut me down the middle, you'll probably see bureaucracy or something like that. My father was a computer operations manager with London Borough Council of Croydon. My mum, she was a deputy permanent secretary in the Ministry of Labour. My grandfather was chief of police in St. Kitts, and my sister, Denise, was the head of communications for UNICEF in Cambodia, as well as in Kabul. That was her last assignment. I am a public servant of public servants. It's my tradition and it's my destiny. I suppose I can say I was shaped by it. It's all been in my family heritage, as you see. And if anybody questions that, one of the things you know is that I have the parliamentary badge, which is in my pocket and not in my hand. But I have that parliamentary badge which says that I belong. And this is quite important, because it's the same story with Paul. For Paul and Judaism, he was so steeped in his Jewish heritage and as a Pharisee that he would say that it's part of his tradition and part of his destiny. In other words, they could not question his credentials, his badges of spiritual status. This is how he described his status before finding Christ. His tradition said, I was circumcised on the 8th day, as prescribed by the law, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, Hebrew on both sides of his family, in regard to the law, a Pharisee. And in terms of that, he says, I conform to the strictest sect of our religion, living as a Pharisee. So we need to explore that, because to understand in Galatians what Paul went through in terms of his transformation, we understand where he's come from. And maybe we need to understand where we've come from in order to have an understanding of that journey. You see, Paul was previously Saul, and he would have known and studied the law of Moses, 613 commands and regulations. And then on top of that, there's the Mishnah, which was the oral tradition that was part of his training and upbringing under the watchful eye of a great legal scholar known as Gamaliel. And he knew in those commandments that God had said, if you follow my decrees and are careful to obey my commands, I will send you seasonal rains. The land will then yield its crops, and the trees of the field will produce their fruit. But then there was the other side of it. If in spite of all of this you still refuse to listen and still remain hostile towards me, then I will give full vent to my hostility. I will scatter you among the nations and bring out my sword against you. And Psalm 137 expresses the suffering and pain that the people of Israel, or the Jewish people, went through as a result of being deported to Babylon in fulfillment of what we just heard. In 587 BC, that happened. And there's a great pop song that we probably should remember that's based on that. He's smiling there. Someone go ahead. Where we sat down, where we wailed, when we remembered Zion, then the wicked carry us away in captivity, required us to sing a song. Oh, how can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? This is the truth. This is what they went through. And this was part of Paul's history. Then in 167 BC, under the Greek tyranny and persecution, this guy, Antiochus Epiphanes, which means God revealed, he decided that he wanted to end the Jewish faith. And therefore, he brought people under persecution. Tens of thousands were killed in that persecution. And he went as far as to offer a pig to Zeus in the temple of God. He was that nasty a character. Tradition shaped Saul in the sense of 164 BC, the revolt of the Maccabees, where they fought back against Greek influence, and then the temple itself was rededicated, and the menorah that you see there was brought back into the temple. And there is a celebration at the end of this year that commemorates that. Anybody? There we go, Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a celebration that remembers that. But to Paul, when he read the prophets, like Isaiah 53, he thought about the faithful Jew. The faithful Jew that suffered at the same time for those types of things of being deported and suffering at the hands of enemies, but at the same time being faithful to God. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. And as a result of that attempt to assimilate them into the Greek philosophy and beliefs, a movement formed under a Queen Salome. And this was called the Pharisees, the separatists. We need to keep ourselves free from this infiltration. And to sum it up, every Jew is God's priest, and every Jewish home is a temple. And therefore, one of the things that came out of that was cherry-picking morals, which we saw in the gospel reading. This is cherry-picking. God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week, and I give 1/10 of all I get. Oh, but you don't mention the other things you don't do. Jesus said, you devour widows' houses, and then for a pretense make long prayer, because if a widow came into her deceased husband's money, they want the 10%. They were after that. They wanted that out of them. On top of that, there was also a way that you could dedicate your wealth to the temple temporarily, and that way you could make yourself exempt from having to support your parents. You didn't have to honor your father and mother if you follow this particular law, which they called Korban. They also had this out-to-in spirituality. You read this in Mark. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And they observe many other traditions, such as washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. This is the stuff of the priests in the temple. But they thought, let me be super spiritual. Let me cleanse everything in sight. Out-to-in spirituality. And so when they saw Jesus, who didn't seem to bother about those things, they said, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat. Jesus' reply, he says, don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. Out-to-in spirituality doesn't work. In fact, it's a masquerade. And Jesus then quoted from Isaiah, where it's written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They pay lip service. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. That was the oral tradition that was alongside the Torah and actually distracted people from it. And of course, there were double standards. They were the ones who would say, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And Jesus would say back to them, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? This is the stuff of the tradition that Paul was steeped in. And the last and worst bit of it is that they would slander to maintain power. Destroy this temple, meaning his body, and I will raise it again in 3 days. How curious that what they said to him was, we heard him say at his trial, I will destroy the temple made with human hands, and in 3 days build another not made with hands. I mean, it's a slightly different meaning from obviously what Jesus was saying. And it's those kinds of things that inhabited the Pharisees. Whether people felt that he was contaminated by a woman who had come to him with gratitude and anointed his feet, or whether it was not washing his hands, or whether it was healing, all of these things led to one eventual decision. They schemed to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. And we know from Isaiah, as it's repeated in Acts, he was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, he did not open his mouth. Jesus had all the power to escape from his captors and yet yielded his life, as we know in the song. He surrendered to sacrifice. We call it atonement, to sacrifice himself. And in his mind, when Paul must have heard about this, he remembered the saying in Deuteronomy, cursed is everyone that has hanged on a tree. Because to be hanged on a tree goes beyond simply being put to death. It sort of wanders into the jurisdiction of something that God only should be allowed to even decide on, which is why the body needed to be taken down, lest it be seen as an affront to God. But in their minds, Jesus died under a curse. And Paul describes his life before. He says, for you have heard of my previous way of life in Judaism, how intensely I persecuted the church and tried to destroy it. At the time, Paul was actually given letters of authority from the high priest to go to different towns and to get people to inform on their neighbors who's a Jesus follower. And if he could do that, he'd drag them into prison and torture them until they denounced Jesus. And of course, most of them, as Christians, held to their faith. And he says, I was advancing in Judaism beyond many of my own age among my people, and was extremely zealous for the traditions of my father, the traditions that I've just described. And this is where we start to look into Galatians and why he is saying this. This is somebody who was shaped by his heritage, and because of that, all the things we mentioned before, he resisted the gospel. And if anyone questioned him, then he had his credentials. I'm Jewish, I was circumcised the 8th day. That was the boundary marker that separated the people of God from those who were not. And then something happened. He describes it in Acts 26. He says, a light from heaven, brighter than the sun, blazing around me. Maybe at the time he thought that this was it, the culmination of God revealing himself in all of his glory to say, well done, you have stood for the faith, just like your forefathers stood against the influence of Greeks. What does he hear? I am Jesus of Nazareth, who you are persecuting. Imagine the self-reproach that suddenly invades his soul. He feels the glory is God, and yet you're Jesus of Nazareth. And he's trying to get his head around it. And then he starts to think about that curse. And something is revealed to him. That curse relates to what the prophets have always said. And that the last of those prophets, John the Baptist, he said, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And so he says later on in Galatians, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law, the penalty of the law, by becoming a curse for us. That's why. I think that. Can you imagine that moment? If this had happened in our day and age with the music that we listen to, imagine what he'd say. suddenly makes sense. Upon a hill, perfect Savior. Upon that day, the greatest love. The punishment that should have fallen on us. Upon him. Upon him. Christ has died. We are forgiven. And Christ alive. We are the risen. And he shall come again. Praise the King. Praise the King. You see, that Isaiah 53 quote, he, up to a point, thought he was talking about the faithful Jew. Suddenly it all made sense. He was talking about faithful Jesus. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. By his wounds we are healed. And so he's given his mission. Get up and stand on your feet. I've appeared to you to appoint you as a servant, as a witness of what you have seen and will see of me. And so he bore the apostles' hallmark. Because as he says in 1 Corinthians, have I not seen the Lord? He was an eyewitness. This was not some vision or some dream. He was an eyewitness of the resurrection. And so he says in Galatians 11 and 12, 1:11 and 12, I want you to know, brothers, that the gospel that I preach is not of human origin. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. And we see that in Acts 9. At once he began to preach in the synagogue that Jesus is the Son of God. He didn't consult with anybody because he knew that his experience was real. And so he sees now what his true destiny is. He speaks of this as his destiny when he says, but when God, who set me apart from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son in me so that I might preach among the Gentiles, my immediate response was not to consult with any human being. And there's a reason for this, because as we will see in the next chapter, which I won't go into, but there's a reason why he says this. He says, I did not go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was, but I went into Arabia. Later I returned to Damascus. Jerusalem was the epicenter of Christianity. It was the cradle of the church, and yet he didn't go to the cradle of the church, even though these apostles started before him. And what it says to us is precedence in time does not equal seniority. I've been in the faith for 40 years and tripped up more times than I can remember. Josh here, I don't think you've been in the faith for 40 years. That doesn't make me senior to him. And he deserves the respect as a pastor because he is an elder in that context. And we need to learn this about ourselves. It doesn't make somebody more worthy of attention because they precede us in time. He says, then after 3 years, I went up to Jerusalem to get acquainted with Cephas, who's Peter. Get acquainted. He's not going to him to see if he can find something for him to do in the gospel. He stayed with him for 15 days. I saw none of the other apostles, only James, the Lord's brother. Why? Because what he's going to be dealing with in the next chapter starts from Jerusalem, and he needs to show that he is not in awe of Jerusalem. The danger of false teaching very often starts with people being in awe of personalities. And we have to be careful not to allow that to take control. He says, later I went to the regions of Syria and Cilicia, personally unknown, however, to the churches of Judea that are in Christ. Personally unknown, you're an apostle. You need to get out there. You need to build your brand. Visibility does not equal importance. Obscurity does not equal inferiority. Now that's a hard thing for people, especially if you're involved in public ministry. Yet, it didn't seem to matter to Paul. In fact, this is what mattered to Paul. They only heard the account. The man who formerly persecuted us is now preaching the faith he once tried to destroy. And they glorified God because of me. Do you see where the focus is? As far as he's concerned, that's it. That's it. You know what? That's what I wanted to hear. For himself, this is what he says, but whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I've lost all things. I said a bit earlier that I am a public servant of public servants, and I work for the House of Commons. Well, let me say I worked for the House of Commons. The opportunity and the work that I do now is for a different organization that works with the House of Commons, because I'm not precious about that heritage and what it might mean and the status it might confer. And that's what Paul's saying here. Don't be caught up in the status and the importance of your heritage and past traditions and all of those things if it doesn't take you closer along the journey that God wants to have you. So this is the true gospel. The true gospel is, I continue unto this day, he says in Acts 26, witnessing to both small and great, saying, none other things than those which the prophets and Moses did say should come. He's not adding to what they said or what they promised. He's simply explaining it, that Christ should suffer, and that he should be the first that should rise from the dead and should show light to the people and to the Gentiles. That was his message. Notice he doesn't exclude the Gentiles from this message. And he says, through him, some people believe, this is a typical preacher's trick, I won't do it anyway. Everyone, you're supposed to say, everyone who believes is set free from every sin. A justification, long words. And I've made it longer by saying this. An officially authorized settlement through a publicly witnessed act. What would normally happen is that if you agree something, you would go before officials, you'd make the agreement, and then you'd do something to confirm and formalize it, to seal it. And it would often involve making sacrifices. The sacrifice in this case is Jesus. And that frees us from all of the things that we saw in the past that we couldn't keep under the law. So it means that there are no more of these out-to-in religious markers like circumcision, like the Sabbath. It's all out-to-in rather than working from the inside out. They all just foreshadow Christ. The one other thing to note is that there is always a warning where he says, take care, what the prophets have said does not happen to you. Look, you scoffers, and wonder and perish, for I'm going to do something in your days that you would never believe, even if someone told you. If we walk away from that amazing message, then this is saying that there will be consequences for saying no to Jesus. History doesn't decide your destiny any more than my family heritage decides my destiny. Because Paul says, now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. That was his destiny. And so as the band comes back now, as with Paul, freedom means that we can, just like I have done and given up that badge of approval known as my House of Commons pass, it means that we can throw away those badges that stand in the way of God's heavenly calling.
You're like a circle that floats around me, keeping me safe and sound. And when I fall, you've tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day.